Nobody in the neighborhood knew that the woman who organized the church bake sales, who always greeted people with a warm smile, who wore the most beautiful ankara to every school event, was the same woman who locked a 12-year-old boy out of the house in the rain. But Chidera knew. Chidera knew everything.
I am so sorry.
The day his father brought Amanda home, Chidera was 9 years old and still sleeping with his late mother's wrapper folded under his pillow. His mother, Chika, had died 18 months earlier. A car accident on the Enugu-Onitsha Expressway. A rainy night. A truck driver who fell asleep at the wheel. Chidera had not cried at the funeral. He had stood very still in his small black shirt and watched them lower his mother into the red earth. And something inside him had simply closed. His father, Mr. Toba Konkwo, was a good man who was bad at being alone. He was a civil engineer who worked long hours and came home to a silent house, and a son who had forgotten how to speak at dinner. He had met Amanda at a colleague's wedding in Akka. She was 31, sharp-featured, with a bright laugh and organized opinions. She told Tobe she loved children. She told him she had always wanted a family. She was not lying, exactly. She did want a family. She just did not want the one that came with Tobe. The first sign was small. One Saturday morning, 3 months after Amanda moved in, Chidera came downstairs to find his mother's photograph, the one that had sat on the sitting room shelf since the funeral, turned face down. He stood in front of it for a long moment. Then he picked it up, wiped the glass with his sleeve, and placed it back upright. The next morning, it was face down again. He never mentioned it to his father. Tobe woke up early and came home late, and the hours in between belonged entirely to Amanda. Amanda never hit Chidera. She was too clever for that. What she did was quieter and harder to prove. She served him smaller portions and called it his preference. Chidera doesn't like much rice, Tobe. You know how he is. She gave him chores that took hours and then complained he was slow. She forgot to pass on messages from his school. She bought her daughter Samto, her daughter from a previous relationship, who moved in 6 months later, new school shoes twice in one term, while Chidera's were held together with a staple he had inserted himself. When Tobe traveled for work, which was often, Amanda became a different person entirely. You think your father's money grows on trees? She would say, over a plate that was mostly bones. You think you are special because you are his blood? His blood does not feed this house. I feed this house. Chidera would sit across from her and eat the bones. He was 12 by now, and he had learned something important. An enemy who thinks you are weak will always show you exactly what they are. So he watched. And he remembered. There was one person who saw everything. Mama Chika was 73 years old, and lived directly across the street. She had been Chidera's late mother's closest friend from their university days in Nsukka, which made her something like a grandmother to Chidera, though no one had ever made it official. She had sharp eyes behind old-fashioned bifocals, and a tongue that had survived 3 husbands and 2 military governments. She started noticing Chidera in small ways. The way he sat outside on the compound steps when Amanda's sister came to visit, always outside, never invited in. The way his school uniform was ironed, but his lunch was often nothing. The way he flinched when Amanda raised her voice, even when she was shouting at the television. One afternoon she called him over. Chidera, come. He crossed the street and stood at her gate. How are you eating? She asked directly. No greeting, no warm-up. He paused. I'm okay, Mama. Okay is not a meal. Come inside. She fed him that day, and the next time his father traveled, and the time after that. She also gave him a small notebook. Write things down, she said. The truth gets slippery when powerful people want to deny it. Keep your own record. He looked at her. He was 12 and had never been asked to do anything that serious before. Why, he asked. Because the day will come, she said, when someone will call you a liar, and you will need to call them something worse. Accurate. The crisis came on a Thursday. Tobe had been away for 10 days, a government infrastructure project in Abuja. Samto had a friend visiting. Amanda was in a good mood, which always made Chidera nervous, because Amanda's good moods only existed when she was certain nothing was watching her. That evening Chidera came home from school to find the front door locked. He knocked. He could hear Samto and her friend inside, music playing, laughter. He knocked again. Amanda opened the door, looked at him with irritated eyes and said, "I told you to come back at 6. You didn't tell me anything," Chidera said quietly. "You were asleep when I left. Don't argue with me in front of my daughter's guest. It's raining. Then stand under the tree." And she shut the door. He stood outside in the October rain for 1 hour and 40 minutes. He counted. He was good at counting things now. When the door finally opened, Samto's friend was leaving, noticed him on the step, gave Amanda a strange look. Amanda said loudly for the friend to hear, "Chidera, why are you sitting outside? I've been looking for you. Kumain. Kumain." Chidera looked at her. He went inside. He went to his room. He opened the notebook. He wrote down the time, the rain, the duration, what was said. He wrote it in the same careful handwriting he used for his mathematics classwork. Precise, unemotional, correct. Then he called his father. Tobe did not pick up. He was in a meeting. Chidera put the phone down and lay on his bed with his mother's wrapper, and looked at the ceiling. He was 12 years old, and the ceiling had no answers. But for the first time he did not feel powerless. He felt like someone who was building something. Slowly, carefully, without anyone seeing. The twist came from a direction nobody expected. Samto saw it first. Samto was 10 years old and had been brought into this house the same way Chidera had. Not by choice, but by the decisions of adults. She had watched her mother's performance for months. She was not a bad child. She was a child who had learned to survive by staying invisible. And she had learned it from watching Chidera. The night of the rain incident, Samto knocked on Chidera's door. He opened it, surprised. They had never spoken much. Amanda kept a careful distance between them. It was easier to control a divided house. "I saw," Samto said. Her voice was small. "I heard my mum talking to her friend on the phone after. She said you ran outside to play and got wet. She was laughing." Chidera said nothing. "She does this," Samto continued. And her eyes were filling in a way she was clearly embarrassed about. "She did it to my uncle's son too, at our old house in Owerri. She doesn't like." She stopped. Started again. "I'm sorry," Samto said. "I don't know why I'm saying sorry. It's not my fault." "I know," Chidera said. "It's not." They stood in the doorway for a moment. Two children in a house that was performing normalcy. "My mum's friend takes videos," Samto said quietly. "Of everything. She put one on her phone today. Of you, sitting outside in the rain. She was going to send it to my mum. But she didn't look happy about it." Something moved in Chidera's chest. "Which friend?" he asked. The friend's name was Adiz, and she was not as committed to Amanda's version of events as Amanda believed. Adiz had watched a 12-year-old boy sit in the rain while music played inside. And something in her had shifted permanently. She had filmed it, she said later, because she could not believe what she was seeing and wanted to be sure she had not imagined it. She had saved the video to her own phone. She had not sent it anywhere. But she had kept it. When Mama Chica heard what Samto had shared, she made one phone call. Not to the school. Not to the neighbors. She called Tobe directly. He picked up this time. She spoke for 4 minutes. She was a woman who had survived 3 husbands and 2 military governments. And she knew how to make 4 minutes sufficient. Tobe was home the next morning. He sat at the kitchen table with red eyes and asked Amanda to sit down. He asked Chidera to bring the notebook. Chidera brought it. He had 17 entries. Dates, times, exact words. The photograph turned face down, 7 times recorded. The small meals. The locked door. The rain. 1 hour and 40 minutes. Written in ink that had not smudged. In the careful handwriting of a child who had been told that the truth gets slippery and had refused to let it slide. Amanda looked at the notebook and her face moved through several expressions. Shock, then anger. Then the beginnings of a performance about misunderstandings and sensitivity and the impossible difficulty of raising another woman's child. Tobe held up one hand. "I'm not asking you to explain," he said. His voice was very quiet. Very flat. The voice of a man who has understood something he cannot ununderstand. "I'm telling you what I know. And I'm telling you what changes now." He looked at his son. Really looked at him. In the way that he had not looked in a long time. Because a man who is bad at being alone is also often bad at seeing what his need for company costs the people already beside him. Chidera, he said. I'm sorry. Those two words did something to Chidera's face that he had not planned. He had planned to be composed. He had practiced composure for 3 years. He had eaten bones and counted minutes and written everything down. And he had been so composed for so long. But his father's sorry hit a place in him that composure had never reached, and his face broke open like a child's, which is exactly what he was. He cried for a long time. Tobe held him for all of it. He held him the way a man holds someone when he understands that he almost lost them, not to death, but to a silence he should have broken much earlier. Amanda left 3 weeks later. She did not fight it. The video existed. The notebook existed. Samto, when asked gently by a school counselor whether she had ever seen her mother treat Chidera differently, answered with the exhausted honesty of a child who is tired of pretending that everything is fine. Samto stayed. That was the part nobody had predicted. Not Amanda, not the neighbors, not even Chidera. Tobe asked Samto where she wanted to go. And Samto, who had no father in the picture and a grandmother who was too frail to take her, looked across the room at Chidera and said in a voice that was barely audible, "Can I stay here?" Chidera looked at his father. His father looked at Chidera. "You don't have to ask," Chidera said. Mama Chica came for dinner the following Sunday. She ate jollof rice and fried chicken and said very little throughout the meal, which for her meant she was deeply satisfied with how things had turned out. After dinner she found Chidera washing dishes alone in the kitchen. "You kept the notebook," she said. "Yes," he said. "Good." She picked up a dish and began to dry it. "Your mother would have done the same." Chica was stubborn in exactly that direction. She never let go of the truth either. Chidera smiled. It was the first time anyone had described him the same way they described his mother, and it felt like something being returned to him. Something he had assumed was gone forever, buried in the red Enugu earth with her. "Mama," he said carefully, "why did you help me?" She considered the question seriously, the way she considered everything. That mattered. "Because no child should have to fight alone," she said simply. "And because I am too old and too tired to pretend I did not see what I saw." She placed the dried plate on the rack and walked back toward the sitting room without another word. Chidera washed the last dish. Through the kitchen window he could hear Tobe laughing at something on the television. A real laugh, loose and unguarded. The kind that had not lived in this house for years. And underneath it, quieter, finding its shape slowly like someone learning a new language, Samto's voice joining in. He stood still and listened to it. It was not a perfect sound. It was a repaired sound. The kind that only exists in a house that has survived something real and chosen, despite everything, to remain standing. He dried his hands. He walked to the sitting room shelf. His mother Chica's photograph was there, facing forward, the way he always put it back, the way it would always face now that he was the one in charge of the shelf. He touched the frame once, lightly, the way you touch something that cannot touch you back, but still, somehow, feels warm. Then he went and sat beside Samto on the couch. And that night, for the first time in 3 years, Chidera slept without his mother's wrapper under his pillow. He folded it gently, with both hands, with care, with the deliberate slowness of someone performing a small ceremony, and placed it on the shelf beside her photograph. Not because he was letting go, but because he no longer needed to hold on so tightly just to survive.